real quick, this is just breaking news. John Clark from ABC Sports Philadelphia, according to Shams Charania, if I say that correctly, I hope I'm saying that correctly. Yep. Kyle Lowry called for a Sixers team meeting last night, and Tyrese Maxey called out Joel Embiid to be on time for team activities. He has reportedly been late a lot because of how it affects the rest of the team, according to Shams.
Look at that. Cliff coming in with breaking news. Clutch. Oh boy. All right, so I've pulled up the story since. Raja looks like he's going to unload in a second here, but let me just read a couple more paragraphs from Shams' story on ESPN.com. He's referring to this meeting called by Kyle Lowry, obviously veteran of that group. A much-needed heart-to-heart, this is Shams writing, a much-needed heart-to-heart and a call to action and urgency, sources told ESPN, in which both players and coaches held each other accountable and took fault in the start of the season. In the meeting, Maxey challenged Embiid to be on time to team activities, calling out the former league MVP about being late, quote, for everything, end quote, and how it impacts the locker room from other players to the coaching staff. Maxey and Embiid have a close friendship and a history of holding each other accountable, according to those around the team. Quote, Tyrese loves big fella, but this is the elephant in the room. Person involved in the meeting told ESPN. Players told 76ers coach Nick Nurse that they wanted to be coached harder. Coaches in turn said they wanted players to practice with purpose and attention to detail. Raja, I'm sure you have been part of many, many, many team meetings, players-only meetings, emergency meetings, screaming matches, what have you. After everything that you just heard, what is that telling you about the Sixers right now?
Oh, man. I don't know. Where do I start with that shit? Before that story broke, I fully intended to come on here and tell you guys, everybody chill out. Like Philly, just everybody calm down, man. Like, he came in injured. There was a lot of bullshit leading up to the season. We'll figure this out. Let him get in shape. I've only been in team meetings. I haven't been in many, Howard, you would think, but I was blessed. I didn't play on bad teams. Not a lot of them.
I mean, although even good teams sometimes have that crisis moment where it's like, guys, what the hell are we doing?
Yeah, but so this, then let me get a little deeper than that. Even the bad teams I played on, and I did play on some, we didn't have dysfunction in a way that we felt necessary to gather everyone together to have a come to Jesus. Let's all see it the same way. You could typically, even on good teams, when things went wrong, just figure it out. Like, yeah, we had those moments, like we slipped a little bit, but like, a few of you go to dinner, your leadership, and, we're going to talk about some of the things and we're fine. We don't have to bring everyone into that. That screams dysfunction. Like, now, I'm not saying that they can't be productive and you can't come out on the other side of one of those meetings better for it, but it just screams dysfunction. And then when you get to the essence of why we're having some of the things that Shams was quoted or had quoted people as saying in the article, like, coach me harder. Why the hell do I need Nick Nurse to coach me harder? I don't fucking need you to coach me harder. It's my job. I'm out here trying to survive and trying to win. I don't need you to coach me harder. Now, if Nick Nurse has been made to feel like he has to walk on eggshells as it relates to actually like holding people accountable, I mean, that's a bigger cultural issue, but he should feel free to do that. And I would honestly tell any coach, hey man, me, my kids, anything, bro, if they're not doing their job, absolutely stand up and let them know that's your job. But generally speaking, I don't have to tell you to coach me harder. My job is to come in ready to play. Your job is to coach me and get me in the right positions. Having to call out Joel Embiid, I don't care if they have a history of holding each other accountable. That means nothing to me. Like, the fact that we have to have this conversation with you is a problem. That is a huge issue for the player of your caliber, for a player that represents a city, one that got his ass to a microphone less than a month ago talking about all he's done for the city, and yo ass ain't on time consistently? Bro, that's a big problem for Philly. And, I didn't mean to lose my shit, but, I was one of those guys that like, I was a hard hat, blue collar type of player, man. Like, and I always respected a Philly fan, even when I got booed by Philly fans for not being as good as they thought I should be in year two. Like, sometimes I didn't think that was the most productive, but I understand where you're coming from. And they didn't boo you if they felt like you were leaving everything out on the court, even if you weren't as good as the next guy. But they don't stand for you guys like not putting forth the effort. Like, that's the one thing a Philly fan does not get over. Like, it's not always about winning and losing. It's about the perceived effort. Like, what are you willing to put into that, in the effort to be the winner? And clearly the Sixers are leaving a lot on the table in regards to that. And it starts with the big fella. And Joel, like, I just say this, I give him a lot of credit for what I thought was maturation, especially at the mic as he's gotten older. And clearly he's a great player when he's healthy, especially offensively. But that is a huge red flag when Tyrese Maxey has to call you out for being late to everything. That's bananas.
Yeah. So this is in the wake of the extension, but also, of course, in the wake of his knee surgery earlier this year, in the wake of everything else he's gone through physically, Joel Embiid. And listen, Raja, you know this. I have defended Embiid on this count, that I don't think the Sixers' failures in the postseason, their lack of a conference finals appearance and all that during his era, is not all on Joel Embiid. Ben Simmons came and went, and James Harden came and went, and Jimmy Butler was not retained by the franchise. Like, these are all things that have nothing to do with Joel Embiid or his commitment or his fitness or his desire. And he's been banged up a lot. And okay, some of that could be on him if you want to say, well, a lack of conditioning is what's led to him not being healthy at the time of year when they need him most. And that's been the case some years and not the case some years. Sometimes it's just happenstance. Sometimes it's just you banged knees or somebody undercut you or whatever. It's not all on him. So I have defended Joel Embiid on that count. I'm not one who's thought just because he's been hurt and has needed to load manage, and even the stuff about not playing back-to-backs, this is the era we're in. Like, medical staff is going to tell you, for your longevity and for the good of this team, we need to prolong your career. We want to make sure you're healthy in the spring. So I'm not one who's leapt to the conclusion, as I've heard elsewhere, that Joel Embiid just simply doesn't care or doesn't want to play. He's not giving it his all. We've seen this guy in tears at times when they've fallen short. I think after the loss to Toronto the one year, like, we've seen him in tears. We have seen him passionate. We have seen him win MVP. We saw him the season after winning MVP come back and playing even harder and averaging more than a point per minute played, and was on a tear last season before the knee injury. So I don't think we should question his competitive drive or his desire. But all that said, and I have said those things before, when a report is landing literally in the middle of us taping that he's late for everything and Maxey's calling him out for that, that makes me start to wonder. And when I saw the way he played last night, I was sitting there going, is he still hurt? Because I think that's part of this. I don't think he's fully recovered, frankly. And they have obscured this as they do. I don't think he's fully healthy. He's probably not fully in shape because of all the time he had spent off trying to rehab the knee. But then there's that nagging question of is he playing as hard as he could or should? And when Maxey's now questioning his commitment in terms of just being on time, you wonder if that's a stand-in for other things that may be a concern to that locker room too.
Oh, let me where to begin with this, Howard? Okay, I played basketball pretty much my whole life. 94 is when I went away to college. So from 95 to, I don't know when I retired, but let's just use like 2010 maybe as a reference. From 95, all right, that's when I had to be somewhere on time. Practice at Boston University was at 4:00. You had your classes, you had to do this and that. You're in that gym by 2:30, whatever it is, with enough time where if anything went wrong in your daily life, like, you have enough buffer if you're shooting to be there by 2:30, that if something goes wrong somewhere, barring incarceration, you're going to make it to practice, and you're going to make it with enough time to be there and get taped, get your treatment, get warm, all of that. So that starts in 95, right? All the way through my entire professional career. There may be a time or two where you could point to something outside of your control in traffic or whatever. The only time that I started becoming really lax with my habits was my last year in Utah. I had already got into some beefs with the front office. I had got into some beefs with the coach. I had two little boys at home, and we had just had our third son, right? I was distracted and my focus had shifted. I've talked about this a lot. It's when I realized that I was no longer committed to doing this the way that I had been from 95 to 2011, because it was 12 that Zen was born. So only at that point did I start walking into the locker room mostly on time, Howard, but just not early. Okay? So like if practice is at 10, I'm walking in at 9:45, 9:30, 9:50 on a bad day. And the worst was when I was getting a car wash one day and I didn't realize the time. But again, this is priority. I'm not thinking about my job in the way that I should be thinking about my job and fucking respecting it, that I lost track of time and now I'm late for a shoot around with the Jazz and rightfully got my ass handed to me. I say that to say that I was a 13-year vet at the time that had 2 kids, was barely being used, was relatively a shell of himself and as a player, and was clearly not like as focused as I should be. I was not the face of a franchise getting 100 and how much money, Cliff?
3 years, $192.9 million was the extension.
Right. I was not that, right? And I was certainly not an MVP level player. And again, I don't know Joel Embiid. I know what happened to me, and I know why it happened. It speaks to a lack of commitment to what you're doing. Now, all that shit you said might have been true, Howard, about him crying, him averaging what he averages, point per possession. All of that can be true. And I'm sitting here telling you from experience, when you start tricking off being where you're supposed to be, when everything about your quest as a basketball player, everything for the last 2 decades for him has been be there early, dude. Practices at 12, be there at 10. Practices at 1, be there at 11:30, my guy. That's life. You set your clock by that shit. Now you're late to every single thing. That's a problem.
Joel Embiid is a former MVP who's 30 years old, 31 in March, and he's being called out by the 24-year-old younger co-star who's in his 5th season. Like even that is a bit of an indictment.
Huge problem.
Yeah, it's because I'll make a lot of space, as I just did, for Joel having legitimate health issues and try to get back from those.
Even more reason to be in the building early.
Even more reason to be in the building early. Like and if your teammates are concerned about your commitment level, that to me is the most alarming part of it.
So, I'm sorry, because I know I get hot. It's who I am, right? Like everybody in my house knows, like I'm in chill mode and then all of a sudden I'm hot. As I'm thinking about what you're saying, you talked about kind of the revolving door of players that have come in, and I've been on record with you, Howard, as saying like not all of that's controllable by Joel Embiid. Like he could be playing great and not be getting what he needs to supplement him, and they can't win it, and that's not all his fault. But you talked about all those pieces coming and going. There have been coaches who have come and gone. Joel Embiid's been inconsistent, but it's bigger than Joel Embiid. I talk about this a lot. Like that is an organizational failure. That's a culture that's been established not by the head coaches that come in and out of there, but by somebody above that who I don't know. But there are too many pieces that change, right, around the fringes and with the coaches for you to consistently be sitting in the same spot, for me not to point to somewhere above and say that's an organizational issue. And it could be the way he's treated, Joel Embiid, that is. Yeah. It could be that he's coddled by someone above a coach in a way that there are no real ramifications for whatever he does. And I'm not there. I don't know. I'm speculating. But something is consistent there. I mean, Joel Embiid is one of the consistents, but I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt in the way, because you raise kids. You raise young men when they come into the NBA and they're on your team. Like, there'll be some bad apples. He doesn't strike me as a bad apple, like a bad person. Strikes me as someone who's been spoiled, who's been coddled, who hasn't been held accountable consistently, who's been allowed to slide in those gray areas of whether this is acceptable or not one too many times. And now this is what you got once he gets the bag and he becomes the megastar that Joel Embiid has become. And that is something that starts at the top.
And there has been, I think, a history, not just with Embiid, but when Simmons was there too, when it was Embiid and Simmons, where I think this franchise has, through multiple front offices and multiple coaches, have all walked on eggshells around those guys, and now Embiid, and I'm sure that plays a part in this too. It's all concerning. It is still only 13 games in. There is still 85% of the season left. They are, let me go glass half, not, I don't want to say glass half full. Let's just say glass is not shattered on the floor yet. They're 3 games out of 10th place, which is the final play-in spot, which is Charlotte right now. There are only 4 teams in the Eastern Conference even over 500 right now. That's the Cavaliers, Celtics, Knicks, and Magic. So there's plenty of room here to catch up. And they have yet to have a game with Maxey, Embiid, and Paul George together. They went all in on a really top-heavy alignment here. They went old school super team. And when you do that, it means that when any one of those guys, or in a lot of games, 2 of those guys have been out, the drop-off is huge. You just don't have a lot of other guys to lean on. Kyle Lowry is in his 18th season or something. And, Andre Drummond, they picked up in the offseason hoping he could, fill in all the non-Embiid minutes and games, and that hasn't worked out so well. There's just not a lot to lean on if Maxey, Paul George, and Embiid aren't all out there, and they haven't had a game with all 3 of them yet. So I still say, let's take a deep breath. The players only, or the team meeting and the calling out of Joel Embiid, all concerning, but it is only November 19th. And I think in an Eastern Conference where things are very unsettled, they've got plenty of room to turn this around. My lingering question here, Raja, for you is this. I just gave again, glass not quite shattered on the floor yet, there's still time perspective on this. But I do wonder, is there a point of no return when you've had too much early losing? You're in such a hole, you're in such a funk, the vibes are so bad, and you're calling each other out. Is it possible that a season can go off the rails this early just by being in a big hole with bad vibes?
100%. 100%. Now I'm with you in terms of on the court production, Howard. You touched on a lot of things in terms of those big 3 not playing together, Joel Embiid not being healthy, their positioning in the Eastern Conference, and what's still possible if they can figure out, how to kind of those 3 skill sets. If you can be at 75% of yourselves, I think there's room for it to be okay. To answer your question, and then I want to finish my thought. Yes, things can go off the rails really early, especially when it's dysfunctional and toxic, right? And I'm not in that locker room. I'm just hearing the reports like you guys, so I don't know where they stand. But I would say this, with these reports, yeah, physically, you can look at it and be like, it's not complete panic mode. There's physically time to do that. But what they have going on, rarely in a situation like that does that team ever reach 100% of its potential. And so you might squeak in, you might get into the playoffs, but when you've got that type of stuff going on, you're not reaching maximum potential. So if you were thought of as a potential championship team, I don't think you recoup from something like this and become that. If they do, and I'm wrong, it would be maybe the greatest turnaround in NBA history. I mean, and honestly, I don't know if the stats would support that. Anybody come out the gates 2-11 and win an NBA championship?
I don't think so.
Yeah, but you know what I mean? It's just, they could be fine, and we can kind of smooth all this over and bury it. I would say it would be probably just right under the surface for most of the year. Maybe it just doesn't boil over again, but you're not going to be what you potentially could be. Those cards have already been played. That writing's on the wall.
Yeah. And that's the part that's really sobering, right? Because turning around the season and becoming a playoff team, even making a deep run, all of that can make you feel better about the season. But if 2-11, I'm without looking it up, I'm pretty certain that no one's ever started 2-11 and won a championship. And the whole point of the exercise of signing Paul George to a very large contract that goes into his late 30s at a very high number, and really has a lot of risk built into it, because the whole point of the exercise was to win a championship now. And if this season's already potentially sunk, not sunk in terms of making the playoffs, not sunk in terms of making maybe even winning a round or two, but if everything that's built up so far means know there's no chance of getting to the finals, winning a championship, then there's another year burned. And now it's okay, Paul George another year older and Embiid another year older, and it's rough.
Yeah.
It's rough. But again, a lot of season left to play. So